My name is George Vincent. I'm Vice President of the Pinole Historical Society. I'm here this afternoon to interview Ed LeFebvre, early resident of Pinole. Ed comes from one of the pioneer families of Pinole, and he has quite a background in the history of Pinole. And he's going to share with us today some of the memories he has of this town. Ed, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
What do you want to know?
First of all, I'd like to know when you were born and how old you are.
I was born January 19th, 1921. I'm 89 years old. I was born in the house on Nob Hill Avenue that is adjacent to that little Nob Hill Avenue park.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family? You have quite a pioneer family background.
Well, my mother was the daughter of Joe Buckley, who was a local rancher, and my father was the son of a blacksmith in Auburn, California, and that's where he was born and raised. He moved down here to get work. He went to work at Hercules Powder Company as a young fellow, worked in nitroglycerine for 18 years, which was kind of a record because most people in nitroglycerine didn't live that long. I have 3 sisters and a brother that are all older than I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Buckley Ranch?
Well, the original old Buckley Ranch was at the Contra Costa end of the tunnel over there in by Orinda. My grandfather came over here from New York, went to San Francisco, landed in San Francisco, and found out that there was a big demand for fresh milk. So he traveled over into the East Bay and found there Orinda a place for sale, and he finally settled down, got some cows going and got some milk going, and went back around the Horn, picked up his fiancée and brought her around and married her. And they settled down there and raised their family and kept expanding the ranch. And he was responsible for building the first tunnel through there because he had to haul the milk up over the Fish Ranch Road, which was a hardship. So he used to go to Oakland and hire a haul and promote the tunnel. And finally he got people interested in it. That's where the tunnel was originally built.
I remember your father very well. He was very active in the fairs in Pinole.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a councilman for I don't know how many years. And a mayor for 1 year at least. I don't know, it was after World War II. I don't know. But he was mayor for at least 1 year. I think at that time they had rotating mayors, 1 year in and then you're out. But yeah, he was very active in Pinole. He was a member of the Oddfellow Lodge and was very active in that. Ended up working at Union Oil Company for over 20-something years. Retired from Union Oil. Then he became very active in the Pinole Lions Club. That was his highlight. He really loved the Lions Club because it did a lot of work with kids with needing sight glasses and things. He loved that.
As a boy, I remember the Buckley barn that used to be here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Buckley Ranch as you remember it?
Well, at one time, it spread out pretty good. Most of it was under lease. They leased the property, but he owned about 50 or 60 acres right here where he had the barns and corrals and the house. And the big barn was burnt down by somebody that pulled up on a motorcycle and torched it and rode off. And then the second barn was set fire the same way. So the city fire department and my relatives got together and decided the best thing to do was tear the house down before somebody torched it and set other houses on fire. So that's how the property was disposed of as far as the barns and the houses were concerned.
Your dad, how did he meet your mom?
Oh, gee, I don't know. I have no idea how my mother and father met. They were very kind of private people. They never talked much about that. Their romancing days. So I don't know. Maybe my sisters would know. Maybe sometimes a mother will talk to their daughters, but my mother wasn't going to tell me anything about how she met my father. And personally, I wasn't really interested either. They were members of the Pinole Methodist Church. I went there religiously. And we got a minister in town every year. The Methodist Church, for years and years and years and years, at Christmas time, gave out little boxes of Christmas candy. And at Easter time, they gave out a chocolate Easter egg. And then it come along in the 50s, we got a minister that decided he wasn't going to give any Christmas candy. And my father gave him an argument, but it didn't do any good. They did away with the Christmas candy. So then when it came Easter, the minister stood up and said, well, I killed Santa Claus, now I'm going to kill the Easter Bunny. And my father took great offense at that, and he never went back to church. He said he got all the religion he needed from the Odd Fellows Lodge, and he wouldn't go back to church. That was the end of his religious days. That's where my dad was. He had to stand on principle, and that was it. He never forgot it.
Can you tell me your earliest memory?
The day I was born, I remember on the ranch, next door came over with a little collie pup to give me on my first birthday when I was born. And I had that puppy till I was about 14 or 15 years old. So the first thing I can remember is that big collie puppy we named Sunbeam. So that's one of my earliest memories.
You also remembered a story about Emily Vincent at the old Vincent house on 2nd Avenue.
We used to walk from Nob Hill Avenue to the school up on the hill. And there was the Smith kids and myself and the Rose kids all walked together. And when we would see Emily Vincent, George Vincent's mother, leaning over the gate, we all started running as fast as we could because we knew Emily had an envelope that she wanted to mail. And she'd give us the money for the stamps and a nickel extra. We always used to run to get that nickel. And that's how she got her mail delivered for that day. So that's one of my early memories. That was when I was a little kid in grammar school.
Now, you had to walk all the way to Pinole Hercules School.
Yeah, it was a full mile from our house to the school on the hill. And we walked it for 8 years.
Well, you must have some pretty good stories about life in the old school on the hill.
I can remember when I was in the 8th grade, those days Miss Ella Horse was the principal and the 8th grade teacher. And we didn't have any turf. We had tar and gravel out in the playground, which ate up the baseballs pretty rapidly. And I can remember Miss Ella Horse standing there while we would be taking a test or studying something out of a book. She'd stand there by the window with a needle and thread and sew up the seams on the hardball, because in those days they practiced frugality to the utmost, and getting a new baseball to play with was very, very seldom. We had Miss Alice Ellahorst was a first grade teacher. Catherine Beavers was a second grade teacher. Margaret Collins was a third grade teacher, had a school named after her. Elizabeth Stewart was a fourth grade teacher. She had a school named after her. Marie Murphy was a fifth grade teacher. She had a school named after her. Miss Jordan was a sixth and seventh grade teacher. She didn't make the grade with the school. But Frances Ellahorst was the eighth grade teacher and principal, and she had a school named after her. One thing I think might be of interest is my sister Dorothy Serene had a daughter by the name of Jackie, who married a man by the name of Higginbotham. Now, my mother, Mabel LeFebvre, had Frances Ellahorst as her principal at school on the Hill, and she had Elizabeth Stewart as her fourth grade teacher at the school on the Hill. And Dorothy Serene had the same two teachers as their principal and vice principal, and Jackie Higginbotham had the same two teachers as her principal and vice principal. So that was 3 generations with Miss Ellahorst and Miss Stewart, which is a pretty good record.
The school on the Hill was known for being pretty strict and disciplined. Do you remember in the classroom the teachers being pretty strict?
Elizabeth Stewart used to say, "I will take you by the chin and dance you up and down the aisles." And believe me, if it came to that, she could. Carolyn Jordan was a cowgirl. She was a big, tall, raw-boned ranch girl. As a matter of fact, her brother was still a rancher. And sometimes in the afternoon, we'd want to get away from school. We'd say, "Miss Jordan, have you seen your brother up at his ranch lately?" And she'd start in telling us all about the ranch and forgetting all about what we were supposed to study. But believe me, if she wanted to, she could dance you up and down the aisle too. And I remember Frances Ellahorst, the principal. For some reason or other, I did something on a rainy day in the basement with my lunch that was I didn't put it in the right barrel or something, and she grabbed me by the shoulder and beat on my back. So yes, those teachers were all very, very capable of getting your attention.
Yeah, who was your favorite, Ed?
I think my favorite teacher was probably Miss Ellahorst. She was really, really special. She was one in a million. She was really special. One thing she did when we got to the 8th grade, she said, "You're going to have homework the rest of your career, and there'll be no homework this year," which I thought was pretty good because I never liked homework. But they were all special. It's hard to pick a special teacher because they were all special. Your mother was a substitute teacher, and she was very good. I can remember her. She used to put on little impromptu plays when she would substitute. She was real good, well liked. But they were all special.
Just kind of imagine what it was like walking down San Pablo Avenue. What were some of the businesses? Where did you go as kids?
Well, my main concern walking home down San Pablo Avenue was my girlfriend father was the butcher, Tom Smith. And he was kind of a crusty old guy. And it was right there on San Pablo Avenue, the butcher shop. So when we got there, I always let her walk ahead so we wouldn't be seen walking together. Her father wouldn't see us walking together. And after we got by the butcher shop, then I'd catch up with her. For some reason or other, my mother didn't put up a lunch for me that day. She wasn't feeling well, or she didn't have anything to put up. We'd stop at Weiss and get a banana, a Danish, and a bag of potato chips from Weiss. I remember that the potato chips were a nickel, but I don't remember what the rest of us cost because I put it on my my parents' bill. Those days, everybody ran a bill. The boys, Billy Lewis, who had the store down there in the corner, the butcher shop, we call it the Portuguese store, Ponce and Baraka. They'd get on the telephone and call, and take your order, and then a couple hours later they'd get in their truck and deliver it, and you paid your bill once a month if the merchant was lucky.
You remember the movie theater?
Oh, sure. I remember the movie theater. I remember there was a lady by the name of Mrs. Scott. Her son was Walter Scott. She played the piano for the old silent movies.
You must remember Pinole had quite a few saloons.
Well, in my day, there was the Antlers, the Gondola Cafe, Valpera. Manuel Marcus had the pool hall. He had a saloon. Where the gas station is there, that across from the Antlers, that was Lungi had a Italian restaurant and saloon. Before him, before Prohibition, was Jimmy Silva's, had a saloon.
You mentioned the Opera House. You remember the Opera House?
The Opera House was between the Antlers and where the Collins family home is. It was a big two-story building. They put on shows. If some kind of a movie, or not a movie, but a stage play was playing around the country, they wanted to come to Pinole, that's where they would put it on. The local lodges put on plays in there. Local people, lodges met in there. They had meeting rooms upstairs. They used to have dances called the Odd Nights of the Red Eagle. That was put on by the Odd Fellas, the Redmen, the Eagles. They all got together and have a big dance. And that's what they call it, the Odd Nights of the Red Eagles. It burned down sometime in the 30s. Which made a heck of a fire. That's all I can tell you. They had a gas slot in there. If you had doings that night and you wanted to use the heater, you put quarters into the meter, and somehow it got short-circuited out and caught fire in the middle of the night and burnt to the ground. One thing that was interesting, one lodge with their initiation used a casket and an actual skeleton. And when the bit burned down and they went through the ashes, everybody got excited when they found the skeleton. Took a while because actually nobody wanted to admit that it was part of their initiation because it was supposed to be a secret. But they had to come out and say that finally they had to admit that was their skeleton.
Ed, you talk about you were pretty active in community events in Pinole. Can you tell us about? You said you were in the Pinole band.
Yeah, I was in it for 4 or 5 years. I played the snare drum. We used to go down the valley, play 3 or 4 towns down Ceres, and I don't remember all of the towns we played with down there. We got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, hired a bus, rode down there in a bus. It was always 110, 120 down there. We played, of course, in Pinole. We had some real good musicians. They were really, really good musicians that played in that band. As a matter of fact, we had one year we had a band that was playing dance music in one of the hotels in San Francisco. And they were college men. There were 3 of them. And they played in the college bands, and they used to play military music in those days in the college bands. None of that hip-hop they play today. And these 3 guys came over and volunteered to play for nothing, just to get back in a band. And they heard about the Pinole band, and they came over and they used to play with us. They were real nice guys, and they were real good musicians. They played Saturday night in San Francisco. They got up early in the morning, came over and played with us, and went back and played again Sunday night in San Francisco. But we had some good musicians locally too.
Who were some of them?
Well, Ray Clark was a member of the Clark family. It was Roy and Ray. Roy was a fireman for years and years and years, and Ray played trumpet. Hank Elliott played tuba. Your father, George Vincent, played trombone. Eddie Silvas played snare drum. Bino Marcus played the bass drum. Kid by the name of Lawrence Rose played clarinet.
This was for the Holy Ghost, right?
Yes, mainly for Holy Ghost. That was the foundation of the band. Billy Lewis was Portuguese. His brother played trumpet, Frank. But Billy Lewis was the organizer of the band, and that was mainly for Holy Ghost.
Now, comes the Depression days in the 1930s. How did that affect Pinole and you personally and your family?
The Prohibition?
Well, Depression days. Before the war.
Oh, Depression. Oh. Well, most places were pretty decent. Instead of laying off, people worked three days a week, and that allowed them, like Union Oil Company and Hercules Powder Company, that allowed them to just cut back but not lay off. So most people didn't get laid off, because most people here worked at Hercules Powder Company or Union Oil or C&H. And all 3 of those people cut back rather than lay off. So people squeezed by. We weren't hit too hard. My family, we had chickens and cows and what have you, so we had maybe not a lot of money, but we had a lot to eat.
When you were a young guy in Pinole, growing up in Pinole in your teens, 20s, what did you do for fun? Did you have a car?
I bought my first car in Crockett. It was a 1940 Chevrolet convertible. It cost me $1,100. I, at that time, was working as a power lineman, and I was building the power in for the shipyards in 1, 2, and 3. So I had a steady job, and it worked out pretty good. I sold it when I got married in 1946 for $1,350. So I did pretty good with that car.
You did. Where did you go on dates? Where'd you take a girl for a good time?
Well, you could take a girl to a theater in Richmond, the Fox Theater in Richmond, and you could take her to Martin's Grill across the street and have ice cream, and the whole thing wouldn't cost you $1. Even with putting a few gallons of gas in the car, gas was about 13 cents a gallon. A show was only 15 cents. So for $1, you could take a girl and show her a pretty good time. Sit soft, sit in the loges. So that's what we did. As far as dates were concerned.
Then came the war. Now, how did the war affect you? The war, World War II.
Well, I was about 5'11". I was playing semi-pro baseball. I was a big, healthy guy. And everybody in town had somebody in the service. And they were looking at me like, what's wrong with that guy? At least that's the way I felt they were looking at me. So I took Normie Rose over to San Francisco. He was going to enlist in the Army. And while I was over there, I wasn't in the Army because I only had one eye. I lost my eye due to a piece of steel that took a cataract, took it off, took a lens with it, and I only had one eye. So they wouldn't accept me in the service, but I couldn't go around advertising that. So I watched everybody line up, take the eye test, then go on. So while I was waiting for Normie, I memorized the line that everybody was reading. Then I filled out the forms, got in line, took the same eye test, and the next thing you know, I was in the Army. The only notable thing about me being in the service was I'm the only guy I ever knew that was in the China-Burma India Theater. Nobody knew there was a war going on over there. And I was over there for over 2.5 years in the jungles of Burma and India and China. And nobody knew that. I wrote to one of my girlfriends a letter, and she answered back. She said, I was surprised they censored your letter. I didn't know there was a war going on over there, which was the last time I wrote her.
Baseball was a big part of your life.
Huh?
Baseball was a big part of your life.
Yeah,
tell us about
I love baseball, yeah.
Tell us about the Pinole Merchants.
Yeah, I played for the Pinole Merchants. Before World War II. I never played for them after. I played baseball for the Army during World War II. And I coached Babe Ruth League for 7 years. Went as far as the county championship with them. And I'm still a Giant fan. So I'm on to baseball.
Red, your brother Red, and yourself, you both played for the Pinole Merchants. Where was your field?
My brother, I don't think he ever played for them, and he managed them. He managed the Pinole Merchants, but I don't think he ever played for them. But he was a good manager.
Who were some of the players?
Oh, Louis Lavaroni was the backbone of the Pinole Merchants. He more or less formed it. Mickey Quinn, Mike Lewis, Eddie Lewis, Doyle Taylor, Louis Francis, Mel Marcus. That's the Harold Silvas.
Where was your home field?
We built Pinole Fernandez Park. Dr. Fernandez donated the land for that park, and it just sat there. And it was low. It flooded every year, so they have a construction job in town. They dump the chalk rock onto the field. So we went in there and broke it up and actually moved in soil into the infield on the pitcher's mound, and we built Fernandez Park. We built the backstop the city of Pinole said, here's the lumber, you build it. So we gave them our dimensions, the number we needed, and the dugouts, and we built it. And Jimmy Bradley was a painter at Union Oil Company, and he went to the oil company and got them to donate the green paint, and he helped us paint it. So that's how Fernandez Park got started, with the Pinole Merchants. It was an offshoot of the Three Brothers baseball team that played in Hercules. A couple of them, Mickey Quinn and Louis Laveroni, got in a fist fight with some of the Hercules guys, and they kicked him off the Hercules team, the Three Brothers team, and then Laveroni formed the Merchants. So,
well, you've had quite a career. You had different jobs. I know you had a sporting goods store in Pinole.
Yeah.
When was that, Ed?
When was that?
Yeah.
That was about 52 or 53. Yeah, that was one of the highlights of my life.
Now, what about your cowboy career?
Well, that was, I was playing baseball for the Merchants, and I got tangled up with a guy named Mel Hansen. He was from Pinole, and he was a cowboy, rode in rodeos all over, and I got tied up with him. So I quit the Merchants, started riding rodeos on weekends. I rode bareback broncs. Mel rode bulls and saddle broncs. And we were down in Bakersfield, and he got gored in the ribs by a Brahma bull and put in the hospital. When I got ready to get home, I went to visit him. He was going to stay there for I don't know how long. He got up and grabbed his clothes and put them on and come home with me. He was really crazy. But anyway, that ended on July 4th in Reno. I came back from the service, and we wanted to start in again. And we made what they call a bucking barrel. You take a big wine barrel and tie it with inner tubes and then ropes, and you can put a saddle or a surcingle on it and climb aboard, and 4 guys would pull the ropes with the inner tubes, and it would buck. And that's how we got practice. So we signed up to ride in Reno Rodeo, and Mel came out first on a saddle bronc. He bucked off and immediately had blood coming out his ears. They hauled him away in a taxi cab. That shook me up pretty good. So when I got ready to ride, I come out and bucked off, and there was another cowboy there from Pinole by the name of Frankie Mathis, and he said, "For Christ's sake, Ed, give it up. You've been away from it too long." So when my second horse come out, I didn't get on. I gave it up. I never went back, and neither did Mel. We both quit that day. We'd been away too long.
I remember you, when I was a little boy, I remember you putting on minstrel shows at the old Portuguese Hall.
Oh, yeah, minstrel shows.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, yeah, that was another. Yeah, we finally got picketed. We got picketed by some communist organization. Yeah, but they were very successful.
They were.
People really liked those shows. And I was talking about Miss Ella Horse. We had these pickets come to town and picket us because they didn't believe in blackface. And before the show, the yellow horses drove up across the street at Fernandez Park. And there was these people coming down the street, this riff-raff. And I was embarrassed that I was doing something that would put Miss Ella Horse in the middle of it, and she was going to be right in the middle of these protesters. So I ran across the street, started talking to her, and I said, "Well, Miss Ella Horse, I think we should wait a minute because these are the protesters coming down the street now." She says, "Well, if that's the riff-raff that I've read about, let's go get in the middle of them." So she walked across the street and walked right through them. When she walked by, she turned her head both ways and said, "Common trash." So that's the kind of support we had from locals. As a matter of fact, the FBI showed up and got a hold of me through the police chief. And he went across the street to Arms Grocery Store, which was Arms Grocery Store then. It's the chicken place now. But he took the little window out of the door. It's still there. I noticed it every once in a while. Think about it. So they could get their camera in there and get pictures of these people. And the FBI told me that they had 2 of their people in line with these people. And he said they're the seediest ones of the bunch. So if bad things break out, if some of the locals decide to take these guys on, give us a chance to get our people out. And nothing happened. But they did. They picketed the place.
You lived your entire life here in Pinole. How has it stayed the same, or how has it changed?
Well, it certainly has changed.
What's the biggest change, Ed?
Biggest change?
The biggest change you've seen?
Well, I'd have to say the biggest change would be that we used to be about 600 or 800. Everybody knew everybody in Pinole. Now we're up in the thousands, and you don't know anybody. I don't know my neighbors. And to me, that's the biggest change, because everybody knew everybody in old Pinole, and you certainly knew your neighbors. And to me, that's the biggest change.
When did you meet your wife after the war?
Yeah, I met my wife after the war.
What was her name, Eddie?
Huh?
What was her name?
Her name was Florence McBurney. She was from Southern California. Her father was a ear, eye, nose, and throat specialist and a great citrus grower. That was his hobby, but he had hundreds of acres of citrus. And I was in Reno. Mel Hansen and I, the guy I used to ride with, we used to go to Reno, and on weekends, just to have fun and ride around on little rodeos there. You could always pick up $50 or $100 riding on Saturday and Sunday in little local rodeos. My wife was there. She was staying on a dude ranch on the outskirts of Reno. She was getting a divorce. And I don't know if I ought to tell this story or not. One of the widows, one of the divorcees that was getting a divorce, got a divorce that morning. And the next afternoon, she was going to be married. Her husband was an Air Force pilot, a major, and he was flying a fighter plane in. And they were going to get married on the next afternoon. So that night, before the wedding, and the day she got divorced, the other divorcees took her to town to celebrate bride's night out party. And my wife ended up having a drink at the bar at the same time that my partner and I were standing right behind her without even knowing it. And 3 drunken Air Force pilots come by and bumped into us. And my partner made some sarcastic remark about being junior birdmen or something, and one of the lieutenants hauled off and smacked him in the mouth. And the fight began. And I pulled back my fist, my arm, like that, to down one of them, and I bumped somebody real hard. The house came along and threw the drunks out. They were gone, and I turned around and asked this lady if she was the one I bumped, and that was my wife. That's how I met my wife. which is a hell of a way to meet your wife, but it worked out for us. We were married for 59 years.
Ed, we want to thank you for talking with you today and sharing all of your memories from early Pinole. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, good. Okay.